I feel like the thing that's lost is the Spotify age is like the social aspect of music discovery and music sharing.
Certainly.
Where Spotify gives you interesting recommendations that are algorithmic, and I'm not gonna bemoan the Spotify system. Like I definitely get music recommendations through Discover Weekly that I find are interesting and rewarding. So I think there's worth in the algorithmic model, but when you talk to somebody and they know you on a personal level and they say, "Hey, you're gonna like this," and sometimes it's for non-musical reasons,
Hmm.
like that is the best.
Welcome to For the Record, a casual, mostly unedited conversation series presented by Greenwell, where we speak with music heads about their stories and the music that makes them. I'm your host, McKeegan Voice.
Today on episode 58, I spoke with Ian Chainey. Ian's a music writer. He's been writing Stereogum's Black Market since 2014. He's also the former editor and associate editor, respectively, of the music blogs Invisible Oranges and Last Rites. His bylines span myriad publications, some living, some no longer with us. He's produced many a podcast and has two, in his words, semi-functional newsletters called Plague Rages and Wolf's Week. We chatted about metal in all of its shades of blacks and grays. We chatted about social music discovery and, of course, about great music. Hope you enjoy.
Cold open like we've been talking for like 10 minutes or
Yeah. Yeah. Spontaneously enter some weird topic.
I mean,
Um,
I can talk about embarrassing things I've done on podcasts
yeah,
if we
actually,
want to go that way.
that's a great intro. Please, that's my first question.
Sure, sure. So the one that immediately comes to mind was I was on a panel with a
Hmm.
bunch of people, and I forget what we were talking about. I think it was like videos and their effect on music journalism, like
Mm,
YouTube and stuff like that, the reaction ecosystem.
sure.
And I was on a panel with Metal Trenches. Are you familiar with the Metal Trenches guy?
I'm not. No.
Okay. Well, so he was on there. He's like this somewhat large YouTuber as far as metal is concerned. And in my infinite wisdom, when it came to me to do the introductions, I decided to cut a wrestling promo on him. So it was like me being the ultimate warrior, just like dunking on metal trenches the entire time. And I was like, "Ooh, metal trenches! I will go in the cockpit and take out the pilot." It's like I was doing this, and it throws back to the host, and like you could hear a pin drop. Like nobody got it. And I was like, okay, okay, I guess I'm the asshole. Fantastic. And then another time, I was on a podcast and I didn't know that they were shooting video,
Mm,
and I was having these horrific nosebleeds at the time. It was like dead of winter. My nose was like the elevator in The Shining. Blood would just pour out just spontaneously.
hmm,
And so I was trying to counteract this by putting Vaseline in my nose all the time.
uh-huh.
And so the problem with this is that I would have to go off camera to put Vaseline in my nose and then come back on camera. And the host just stopped the interview and was like, "Are you doing coke?"
Yeah, I was
And I
gonna
was
say,
like, "No. What
it's
are you
Vaseline,
talking
I
about?"
swear.
Yeah.
Oh, it's amazing. I can't wait to see what you're gonna do in this one.
Yeah. We're locked and loaded. Yeah.
Yeah. Uh, cool. I love that. Um, cool. Well, we have that as our beginning, typically as a beginning, and I'll, now segue into what I would typically ask you in the beginning. But I would love to hear about you, about your origins, and about where you grew up, where you're from, and specifically when, how your relationship with music started.
Sure. Yeah, that's a great question. I spend so much time not talking about myself that like I often forget certain facts about myself. Like I
Mm,
feel I can tell you about who showed up in certain recording sessions when and like who was playing guitar where, but when
Yeah.
people ask me about myself, I'm just like, I was born where? I guess. So grew up in Massachusetts, which I
Hmm.
think probably explains a lot. And yeah, I mean, it probably says more about myself than I care to admit. As far as my relationship with music, like it was weird how I got onboarded to all that stuff because I feel like until I was about maybe in the 3rd or 4th grade, I just didn't really care about music that much. it was just kinda like some, like, ambient noise that was in the background.
Mm,
Like, I think I listened primarily to classical music until probably, like, 2nd or 3rd grade.
okay.
Around the age where you can get, like, peer pressured and bullied for, various facets of your life.
Sure.
And, the thing that got me into music was I had a friend who was very into R.E.M,
Cool.
and then secondarily, I decided to get into R.E.M as well, and so R.E.M was kinda like my gateway drug into getting into music. The first piece of music I ever acquired was, a New Kids on the Block single for The Right Stuff, which I got via box toppers from a cereal
Oh,
mail-in
nice.
program, so there you
Cool.
go. But the first CD I ever bought was R.E.M's Green. That was the first thing I ever bought with my own money.
Okay.
That's an interesting album to think of in retrospect because of the early R.E.M stuff, I think that's unarguably the worst, and it is, their major label experimentation album because they're doing pastiches of everything under the sun, and I was very into Stand at the time, and, like, I will say categorically, Stand sucks. That's a terrible song. It's a pastiche of, sunny pre-power pop 60s schlock, and the fact that I fell for that so hard is, interesting, I would say, looking back at it now.
Um, cool. Thank you. I love that. I'm curious, why were you listening to classical music until 3rd grade? Like what, how is that entering your world?
Sure, like, my mom was big into classical, so I think it was just that was what was available at the time,
Mhm.
and so I didn't really have a whole lot of, other inputs as far as, like, what was available in, like, the music landscape, I guess. So, it was just, like, classical because that's what my mom listened to in the car, and then, like,
Mhm.
maybe I'd hear, like, an oldie station if I was, like, in a friend's car or something like that. But everything was just, I mean, this was pre-internet, so everything is just radio based.
Right.
So, you're only hearing stuff either through the radio or the TV.
Right.
And, post REM, I think, like, the big bangs were, my dad had a huge stereo system because he was, like, a big audiophile dork,
Mm.
and he played, the B-side of the Beatles' Revolver,
Mhm.
and I heard Tomorrow Never Knows, and I was like, "Holy shit, like,
Cool.
music can do this?" Like, this blows my mind, and then I remember I was watching the TV, and then just randomly The Byrds' 8 Mile High came on, and I was like, "Oh, wow, okay.
Mm.
Whatever noise this is, that is the noise that is beating in my heart."
I love that. Cool. So, okay, so once you realize that music can like, really tug the heartstrings, post REM phase, what came next? How did you lean in after that?
Sure, post REM phase, I had to get into Aerosmith because you would get your ass kicked in the playground in
That's true.
Massachusetts if you didn't like
Massachusetts,
Aerosmith,
man. Yeah.
yeah. So that was, had to go take my lumps with that one.
Mhm.
And then, as soon as my mom realized I had an interest in music beyond, like, the classical stuff, she tried to figure out, like, what she could do to get me into, like, the rock sphere.
Mm.
And so she went to the library and then she brought home a CD and she was like, "All right, the librarian said you should check this out." And it was Steely Dan's greatest hits, which, I love the Dan
Mm.
now, but, when you're when you're, like, 8 years old, trying to get, down the sardonic lyrics of, like, Black Cow is, like, kinda rough. So I was like, "I don't know." And then she put on the radio, which was, WBCN in Boston, which used to be this, like, independent radio station that kind of, turned into a corporate shill later down the road, but,
Mm.
it was still in its independent phase when I started listening to it, and then, like, it was everything just came, like, hard and heavy.
Mm.
I was like I was hearing all this rock from the past and hearing, like, contemporary alternative rock, and this was, like, the height of grunge,
Mhm.
and so everything was just, like, there for me, and, it had great hosts like Charles Lapadera, and the programming director was doing interesting things before they sold out the Clear Channel, and yeah, it was just that was, like, kinda like the dam bursting, and then as soon as the dam burst, it was just again, like, everything was just there. It was just like this entire world just opened up to me,
Mm.
and then music discovery just became this way of just, listening to the radio, trying to get IDs. I remember, forcing people's parents to sit in a parking lot so they could get, like, song IDs off the DJs, because of course, like, you wouldn't know what the song is.
Right.
So you'd have to sit there like through like 40 minutes of ads and just be like, "Please just come back and just say what song you played last."
No, I remember those moments.
Yeah, I remember one time, I got dragged into San by a parent, and they just dragged me to the sales associate. It's like, "Just tell them what the song sounded like." I was like, "Okay." And so I started beatboxing U2's "Mysterious Ways," which I didn't know what the song was, but I just started beatboxing it to this poor sales associate, fucking graduate school. Like, I can't do this with my life anymore.
Oh,
And the
that's
poor kid was like, "Yeah, I don't know. It sounds awesome though."
funny. Yeah. Oh, that's funny. Um, and when did you start to write about music? Like, when did you yeah, I guess when did music, transform into something that you were enjoying and, beatboxing about trying to track down tracks, and, like, a pursuit in life in which you could explore it through, your own lens?
Sure. Yeah, I think the first piece of music journalism that I ever filed was we had a school newspaper when I was in elementary school. So this must have been like 4th grade, and I transcribed all of R.E.M's "Losing My Religion" by ear. And man, I wish I had a copy of that because I'm sure there's some monogreens in that thing that are like absolutely unhinged. But yeah, I always had this like going forward, as soon as like the music bug bit, I always had this interest in music because I figured that like that was the thing. That was the one thing that kept me interested. For
Mm,
a while, it was kind of like that in sports. Those were the
mhm.
only things that really captured my attention. Which in school, I was like a terrible student because I just couldn't focus or be you know in the mix as far as like other social activities were concerned. So like I remember in first grade, I the school took my parents aside and they was like, "We have to put him in like a different school."
Hmm.
And they're just like, "Why?" And it's like, "A school for, like, special children." Because like, I just would not interact with people, and I would just play, like, Oregon Trail the entire time,
Oh, cool. I
which,
love
I
Oregon
mean,
Trail.
respect to me. I mean, I feel like I was really doing the Lord's work there. And, yeah, so, yeah, like, because music was the only thing that was interesting to me, and I also figured out that I had this, like, somewhat, latent acuity as far as, like, writing was concerned. So the fact that I started to join the 2 when I was, like, maybe in, like, high school started to come together. Whatever it was like whenever there was, projects that we have to be assigned out by in certain classes, it would always be music projects for me.
Mm,
Like, I would always undertake that stuff, and then I was doing, like, light criticism because like, that's just what I was reading on the web at the time.
mhm.
This would be, like, All Music Guide, Epitonic. You guys remember Epitonic?
I don't remember Epitonic, no.
Okay, Epitonic was this way back in the day where you used to have to get MP3s via like not even file sharing. It was like you'd access other people's FTPs
Oh, okay.
and then you download off their FTPs and then they would check what you're sharing. And then if you weren't sharing anything cool, you would just get cut off from the FTP.
Huh.
So
Interesting.
you'd be like halfway through like a Drain STH album, and then some people be like, "Ugh, sponge." Then you get banned, and you like you never see that album again. Yeah. So, yeah, that was how music acquisition happened in the day as far as, like,
Wow.
piracy was concerned.
Mhm.
But, yeah, Epitonic was this MP3 blog that used to have a bunch of, like, I wouldn't call it obscure, but just stuff that was swimming around, like, the 120 Minutes crowd at the time would be, like, a lot of post-punk, a lot of math rock, a lot of post-rock, and that kinda, like, opened my eyes to, like, what the possibilities of, like, music outside of just what was on the radio is concerned.
Mhm.
Just getting, hit with, like because I think for I think for a lot of people, it's just, like, obviously, the Dunning-Kruger effect was undermined by its own its own, thesis that you don't know what you don't know, and,
Mm.
considering that they did so badly with the, statistics on the Dunning-Kruger effect, yes, it is true, they didn't know what they didn't know. But, yeah, I think that maxim still kinda holds out, that you don't know what you don't know, and so, when I was just listening to the radio because, like, there's no other sphere that was, colliding into what I had, like, I just knew what I knew, so, I remember I was able to ID every song on the radio and the playlist at the time and just being like, "Okay, I guess I know the entirety of recorded music now? I guess there's nothing else?"
Yeah.
So, yeah, to get back to your question about, like, how the music journalism bug started. It was definitely in high school when I was just doing, trying to, I wouldn't say like copy, but just like really trying to find my voice via doing essays for school about music that was based off of like reviews that other people were writing because that's just what I was able to see. Then I didn't take the jump until actually like doing the real deal music criticism part until probably like senior year or freshman year of college when I opened up a, man, this is going to date me. I opened up a website on GeoCities.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, I had my own GeoCities website where I was just running reviews of albums that I came across either, on the web or just that I bought. I remember the first review I ever ran was regarding, it's like one of those Pearl Jam side projects. Can't remember the name of it. It had a fish on the album cover.
Oh, cool.
It's like one of those Stone Gossard things, and I was,
Uh-huh.
like, raving about it, and I remember I went back and listened to it, like, 5 years ago, and I was like, "Man, this is absolute trash."
As it happens, yeah. Um, cool. Okay, so I mean, yeah, yeah. What's the next step forward from there? From writing your own stuff. I mean, I always find it fascinating talking to another music journalist who, like, because I feel like the journey from, it always starts with just like, this bug of writing about music just because like you feel compelled, to write about music. It's like like a mode of interaction that allows you to kind of explore how you really feel about it. At least, speak for myself. In that form of expression, like I felt compelled to do it. And then slowly over time, maybe you write for free for somebody else's blog, and then you get paid a little bit, money to do this and that and that and that, and slowly it kind of snowballs until it's kind of a real thing. And I'm curious to hear, how that process was like for you.
Yeah, I mean, pretty much the same deal. I was running my own stuff, and then I remember I came across a website called Metal Review, and the first thing I clicked on was a negative review of like I think it was like some screamo thing that I was super into at the time. Not like the mall screamo, but like the real deal screamo. I just feel like because Metal Review didn't understand what screamo was, I was just like, ugh, you know what? I'm gonna write you guys a letter.
Hmm.
So I wrote him a letter, and they're just like, "Yeah, we like the writing. Like, do you just want to come aboard and just like write stuff for us?" And I was like, "Okay, sure, let's do it." And then that got me jumped into doing that side of music criticism. And I just remember being blown away that I was getting sent like physical promos all the time. And I was just
Yeah.
like, it's like you get sent free music for doing this?
Yeah.
Oh man, this is like the mountaintop.
Yeah.
And so I was doing that for a while, and then because I had clips, like, there was always a need to have music writers around the local scene where I was at because there's just nothing. It was just a wasteland of just, nothingness around here. So, in order to be able to, like, promote stuff for different websites that are trying to get off the ground, like, I got a bunch of clips that way, and then, I always say that I've written for a bunch of websites that I don't remember anymore, and it's like, that's truly the
Same here.
case. It was just, like, anywhere that would take me I was writing for. And like we were talking a little bit offline about like how December is the worst month possible. Like there was a
Mm,
time where it's just like December was the month that you could sneak into like publications that wouldn't have you otherwise,
mm,
just because everyone was like on Christmas vacation. So
uh-huh.
you just like slide and be like, "Hey, so what's up?
Yeah.
You guys need some writing?"
That's smart. I mean, throughout this time, were you just writing about metal, or were you, was it more expensive at that point? Like, at what point did you, uh, start to winnow in?
Sure. Yeah, I think it was more expansive at that point. Like it's always been pretty expansive, but I think the reason that I've written about metal is just because it's like the most high profile gigs that I've had.
Mm,
And so it's been the easiest thing to steer into. Although, I mean, that hasn't stopped me from like writing about disco and invisible oranges. So,
mm.
shout out to IO. My extreme apologies for running that slop. But yeah, yeah, I think that's pretty much just it. It's just the reason I went with metal is because it was like that's where I just had the most experience and the highest profile gigs.
Mm. So it wasn't necessarily just because that was the music that you're most drawn to.
It's metal is definitely one of the genres I'm most drawn to because it hits the chaos aspect in my brain
Yeah.
and scratches that itch, and
Mhm.
I think one of the things I look for in music primarily is to be, like, bewildered by chaos,
Mm,
and there's few other genres of music that do that more consistently than metal.
mhm. Yeah, that's fair. What are some, what are some of the other genres that scratch other itches for you?
Oh, I mean, like, harsh noise definitely scratches that same edge. I was thinking about this the other day, like, why do I have this? Why do I have this desire to hear chaos and loud noises and just, like, be, like, subsumed by the noise?
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's because we used to have this old boiler in our basement when I lived in Massachusetts, and when this thing would kick on, it would sound like a dragon roar. It was like this unholy hell that would just fill up the entire house, and I think I imprinted upon that comfort because I was at home,
Huh.
and so, like, now whenever I hear noise or really loud guitars or, like, really strident sounds, I'm like, "Oh, I'm back home. Cool. Alright. This is nice."
Huh. Wow, I love that. What a nice connection to the old boiler.
Yeah, what a weirdo, yeah. I mean,
That's amazing.
yeah. I mean, that's, as I often say, that's, something that I would normally write on the walls, with my own shit while I'm in, like, while I'm in a psych ward or something, so I'm glad that was appreciated as,
The
like, a sweet moment
boiler.
here. Yeah.
Cool. And then, yeah, I mean, so outside of metal, like, what are the other musical itches that you need scratched, and how do those function for you?
Sure, yeah, I think everybody has those genres where you just hear it and you're just like, "Okay, well, even if this is bad, I'm, like, pretty much in," you
Hmm.
know? And so I also think it hews along lines of like certain eras as well. I remember Fenrez, uh, one of the people behind Dark Throne was talking about that every genre has this period in time where everything is just golden. And for him, like the golden era of house, it's like 1994.
Hmm.
Like if it's house and it was released in 1994, like Fenrez is going to get down with it.
Hmm.
And so for me, it's like if it's disco or dance music and it's released between like 1978 and 1982, like I'm going to get down with it.
Hmm.
If it's early first wave screamo released from, like, 1996 to, like, maybe, like, 2002 before, like, the Pete the Pirate Squid era, like, I'm gonna get down with it.
Hmm.
And if it's jazz from the '70s, I'm probably gonna get down with it.
Hmm.
If it's funk in, like, the Parliament sphere, I'm gonna get down with it.
Hmm.
Like, if it's classical that has that avant-garde bend from, like, Ligeti to Perez, like, I'm gonna get down with it.
Hmm.
And so, one of the things that I normally tell people is that I don't think like any genre of music is inherently bad.
Mhm.
I just think it takes a lot of work to figure out what you like within it.
Yeah,
And if you don't like a genre, I think that's more of a failing on your part than it is the genre's part.
I definitely agree with that. Um, are we in a golden era for anything right now?
Are we in a golden era for anything right now? I don't think you can perceive the golden eras that you're in, right?
Mm,
Uh,
historical context.
yeah, like everything has to happen in hindsight, and I think you have to be like a generation removed from it to figure out what the golden eras are,
Mhm.
because it's kind of like you ever have those experiences where, like, because you look at yourself in the mirror every day, like, you don't perceive changes about yourself,
Yeah, sure.
but then you meet somebody that you haven't seen in, like, 10 years, and you're just like, "Whoa, what the fuck happened to you?"
Yeah.
And it's just like, "Nothing happened to me. I look exactly the same. What are you
Yeah,
talking about?"
yeah.
So I think it's kinda like that with, music genres, where I was talking to, my co-writer on The Black Market, Aaron, about where we're at with screamo right now, and we were kind of flummoxed because, like, all the bands that we used to see back in the day, his example was Jerome's Dream specifically. Like, we used to see in, like, basements and apartments with, like, 10 other people maybe around. It's like, I went to a Jerome's Dream concert last year, and there was, like, maybe, like, 300 people there,
Hmm.
packed into a small space. It was all kids that were younger than me, and they're just, like, going wild for it, and I was just like, "Man, if I could explain to myself, like, 20 years ago that this was gonna happen, like, I just absolutely would not believe it."
Hmm.
But then, those kids perceive what we went through as, like, the golden age of that stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's a good point. Yeah, I guess, to that, uh, kind of, as an extension to that, is there anything that yeah, I mean, I agree, like, in order to define a golden era, we probably need more historical context, but is there anything right now that you're particularly excited about? Something that is feels new or fresh in a way that you enjoy?
Sure, yeah. Like, I think one of the things just to kinda go on my previous point here is that the band Krallice has absolutely been on one for like the past 20 years. And I've been telling people that like you need to enjoy this now
Mm,
because you are going to miss this terribly when it's gone.
mm,
And it's going to be one of those things where people are going to be like, "Oh, did you see Krallice?" And people are going to say no, and be like, "Man, you missed out."
mm.
And it feels like this normal thing, like, "Oh, I'll catch him next time. I'll catch him next time. I'll catch him next time." And like at some point, there's not going to be a next time, and like you're going to regret it because that band has absolutely been on a heater, like an abnormal heater, and we've just normalized it because it's just like, "Oh, there's a new Krause album. That's great, cool. All right, we've done this like how many times? 15 times in the past, 20 years." So there's that. As far as like stuff that's new, that's interesting to me right now. There's this genre that's burgeoning that I've unfortunately named extremely hard bop, which
Huh.
is uh, which is brutal death metal that has a free jazz element to it.
Whoa.
Yeah, and that stuff just absolutely whips. I am so excited about that kind of music. It's really headlined by Incentive Thrack, which is like the unpronounceable band name of like Colin Marston, Weasel Walter, Mick Barr, and Paulo on vocals. And they started doing like improvisational. There we go. Still early in the morning for me.
Mm.
Improvisational brutal death metal. And then other bands just kind of like took it and ran with it. There's this band out in California called Effluence that's it's centered around this musician called Matt Stevens. And yeah, the stuff that he is doing is absolutely so out there. I've called it the end of music because it
Wow.
really does sound like the end of music. Like I really don't know where you take music from there.
Wow.
It's this unholy din of just like art ensemble of Chicago, disgorge, and harsh noise. And it just the way he packages it together is like so exciting and so fresh and
Wow.
just never fails to set my synapses alight. And I just love that stuff right now. And
Wow.
then I think we're in a golden age of brutal death metal right now, where the people that are applying that trade are doing very creative things that I didn't think were possible within the genre. And that's gonna be like bands like Anal Stab Wound and Trichomoniosis, who I just interviewed Hunter Peterson, who's behind that project. And yeah, just this fusion of the extremely technical ability of being able to shred and doing it in very arcane, obscure, esoteric ways. I love that stuff. I love doing your like your 10,000 hours of like woodshedding and then making music for like 3 people. Like that is like metal incarnate. That's like the most masochistic thing possible that you could.
Oh, I love that. That seems like a good segue into kind of part two where I ask you a few more pointed questions. And the first one is about how you discover music. And if you could answer that question through some of your favorite curators and outlets and platforms that you're spending time with.
Sure. Yeah, music discovery has been an evolving process for me, and it's been mostly based around like what are the constraints of where I'm writing. When I was writing for Invisible Oranges, we used to run a column every week called upcoming metal releases, and I used to scour the Metal Archives upcoming releases tab and listen to every single thing that was coming out,
Hmm.
which my god, to any aspiring writer who's out there listening to this, don't do that. Absolutely don't do that. If there's one way that you want to drive yourself insane and burn yourself out, that is the easiest way to do it for sure.
Mhm.
After that, I kind of outsourced a lot of my music discovery to people that I follow on Bandcamp,
Okay.
where I figured that you find these people and they have obviously one interest that they are experts in, and you're able to follow them, and then you just trust that they're able to kind of like sort through the chaff to find the good parts,
Right.
the wheat. And that's been the easiest way for me to do music discovery now. It's just like I just scroll through all my follows on Bandcamp and just be like, okay, this is interesting. This is interesting. I can just cherry pick off their taste.
Mhm.
outside of that, I have an interesting network of friends that are also music writers that I'm able to get stuff through. Doug Moore, who is also the singer for Piron, Scarcity, I'm able to get through stuff for him. Like Wyatt Marshall, that you had on the podcast previously, like he's my atmospheric black metal guy.
Mhm.
Like John Rosenthal, he does a lot of interesting stuff in black metal, so I'm able to get recommendations off of him. I feel like the thing that's lost is the Spotify age is like the social aspect of music discovery and music sharing,
Certainly.
where Spotify gives you interesting recommendations that are algorithmic. And I'm not gonna bemoan the Spotify system. Like I definitely get music recommendations through Discover Weekly that I find are interesting and rewarding. So I think there's worth in the algorithmic model, but when you talk to somebody and they know you on a personal level and they say, "Hey, you're gonna like this," and sometimes it's for non-musical reasons,
Mhm.
like that is the best. Like I connect with two people, Rennie Rasmini, who is in Starkweather. Sorry, Rennie, if I just butchered your last name, and Ron Bentoven, who runs Machine Music, and they both give me recommendations that are based more on my personality than it is my musical taste,
Hmm.
as they understand it. Like, "Hey, this is weird as shit. You're gonna like it." And it's like, it doesn't matter what the genre is. It's like, "Hey, we know enough about you that this is weird as hell. You're gonna like it." And it's like, that is the path forward for music, I feel. I think we need to go back to, like, a word of mouth structure to kinda get around this, major label system that forces artists to do their own PR and be their own A&R and forces them to make, like, TikToks all day instead of focusing on music. We need to
Yeah.
get back to just being like friends, just being like, "Hey, this is weird as shit. I think you're gonna like this."
Yeah. Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly. Um, and yeah, I mean, that's in in addition to that, we get put into our own echo chambers, and you need friends to pull you out of those things, to give you things that wouldn't, otherwise appear in your Discover Weekly because you've been teaching the algorithm what you're willing to listen to.
Yeah.
You're housed in your own comfort zone, and you can still be surprised by people who are coming at it through a completely different perspective.
Yeah, I think the other part of my music discovery is definitely a personality quirk where it's like I just never wanna be complacent.
Hmm.
I always wanna be challenged. I always wanna try to find new things. I always wanna test myself, which in the music sphere is, great. Like, I'm able to find a bunch of new artists and new genres and new styles that way. In my personal life, it sucks. Like, I think that's why I'm divorced. So,
Well, at least you have a fruitful outlet for it.
sure, yeah.
Um, I mean, you found the end of music, as you said, so
Oh, yeah, yeah,
I
you
think
gotta
that's
listen to
as far as it
that.
goes.
Yeah, I will recommend that stuff to, everybody. Like, no one's gonna like it, but if you wanna, really challenge yourself, and if you're one of those people that are just like, "I listen to everything," like, alright, let's
I mean,
see.
that's the first thing I'm gonna put on after this interview ends, so I'm excited. Um, all right, you already answered the first part of this question, but my next question for you is the first album you ever purchased, and the most recent album you ever purchased.
Oh, man, first album I ever purchased, yeah, as I said, R.E.M. Green. I mean, that's also looking back on that, I think that was partly my onboarding into metal because Orange Crush is
Hmm.
a slightly heavier song in the R.E.M. catalog at the time.
Hmm.
Definitely has that doomy trudge to it. And I remember when Monster came out and it had loud guitars, and I wasn't quite uh, in with loud guitars at the time. And I remember putting that album on for the first time because I was still a big REM freak. I remember putting that album on for the first time and hearing the loud guitars and thinking to myself, like, do I have to worship Satan now? So
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. REM, yeah, for sure. As far as last album I bought, great question. I buy so many of these things. Let me take a
Hmm.
look. I'm going to my Bandcamp right now. Hold
Yeah,
on.
yeah. No worries.
Last album I bought was the CD version that they just released of Embryonic Devourment's Prime Specimens.
Nice.
So this is Hunter Peterson. Hunter Peterson, who I talked about in Trichomoniasis, was in this band briefly in 2016. They didn't release an album with him, but they used some of his ideas on the preceding album, and then he used some of his other ideas for this band called Chalorma that he's in. And somewhere down the line, he decided to take one of the old practice sessions that he was on, retract the guitars, remix it, and then release this album as Prime Specimens. And it is fascinating. It
Cool.
is such a clusterfuck of weird guitar leads and blasting drums and weird lizard vocals, and I just love it. It's unlike anything else in the Embryonic Devourment catalog,
Cool.
and I just wish they made, like, one album with Hunter Peterson because they're they're doing some stuff on this one.
Sweet. I'm gonna check that out too. Um, okay, next question for you. Three artists of note that you heard for the first time in the past year or so.
Man, great question. I think one of them is Hannah Francis. Hannah Francis is a folk singer that is up in Vermont.
Nice.
She released this album called Keeper of the Shepherd, because she does have sheep out in Vermont, as one does. I assume everybody out in Vermont has sheep.
That, yeah, I think it's a prerequisite if you want to live
Yeah, to live there, yeah, to establish residency in Vermont, you have to have at least 3 sheep.
in
Uh, and she is what is described as a casual shredder. Like,
Huh.
she can just like, her virtuosity is just unbound, but she looks so unhampered while doing it.
Hmm.
She's like one of those types.
Hmm.
She's like one of those Al Stewart types where you swear that the record is overdubbed, and then you see them live, and it's like, "Oh, it is not. This is just you."
Huh. Cool.
Yeah, so she can shred, and she can also wail. Like, her singing voice is absolutely amazing.
Cool.
Um, I wouldn't say it was in the past year, but if I can stretch the answer a little bit,
Sure.
just to get this mention of this artist in, have you heard Cozy Muller?
Cozy Muller?
Yeah.
I have not.
Okay. Cozy Muller is out of Germany. She does this. I think the word of the hour is gonna be fascinating, but
Hmm.
I have no other way to describe it. She has this fascinating blend of cold wave and punk,
Cool.
and so it's like listening to Kraftwerk if Kraftwerk was, like, super into the Buzzcocks.
Wow. Interesting.
I'm like, yeah, like, she's doing fantastic work
Okay,
as
I'm checking
well,
that
and
out.
then,
Up my alley.
also swiping through my Bandcamp just to make sure I don't sound like a dumbass.
Hmm.
Oh, Ouija. Ouija
Ouija.
is a member of, Sunrise Patriot Motion and Yellow Eyes and a bunch of other people. Ouija sounds like if Sonic Youth was taken over by the Cramps.
Wow.
So I'm super into Ouija right now too. They just, re-released their album Primitive Thrill. Buy it on wax if you can. It sounds amazing on vinyl.
Okay. Cool. Cool. I love all the associations you're making. You're really, helping me paint a picture. I mean, you are a music journalist. I do appreciate that. Putting
Oh,
the
yeah, yeah. Yeah, I catch a lot of flack for,
Sure.
describing music through comparison. Like, I remember I was doing an interview one time, and he was like, "Can you, like, not describe my music as this plus this?" And I was like, "I don't know, dude. That's how the
Yeah, I
brain's
mean,
wired. I'm
I'm
sorry, but."
I mean, it's a useful reference point. It's how we live life. We associate things that we see with other things, and then it helps us understand them.
Oh, yeah, it's like genre tags, like,
Yeah,
those are only useful to other music writers and, like, how to file stuff in a record store. Like, I
true.
don't think normal people should pay attention to that stuff whatsoever, but,
Hmm.
I live and die by that, so.
Yeah, yeah, indeed. Okay, here's the big question for you. You're going to a deserted island, and you get to bring three records with you. What are they?
Oh, 3 records. Ligatee's Requiem.
Nice.
That is the number 1, piece of music all time. That is, like, the most meaningful work to me. Um, Gentle Giant's Freehand,
Nice. Wow.
and I need a 3rd, huh? Oh, man, man, there's so many things battling for that 3rd spot.
I know third one's the toughest because that's the
Uh,
end. And they close the door on all the other options.
yeah, I mean, the most important artists in my life, I think, is Prince, Richard D. James, and, uh, John Coltrane.
Wow, that's tough to choose between those 3.
Yeah, but I think I have to choose, like, an Alice Coltrane album, like, maybe Journey? I
Oh,
think Journey?
nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great record. All right, this is a coda question, but Alice Coltrane or John Coltrane?
Oh, I mean, the entirety of John Coltrane's work is just I gotta give it up to John Coltrane there, but
Mm,
I think some of the highest highs I've ever had in music listening has come at the hands of Alice Coltrane, so
yeah.
can't deny either.
Well put. I think I agree with that. Yeah. Yeah, for the exact same reason. Cool. Ian. Well, you made it through. Uh,
Went through the gauntlet.
went through the gauntlet. For folks who are listening who want to hear you, associate other artists that they haven't heard of with artists that they have heard of, where can they follow along with your work?
Sure. I think if you want like the most unhinged recommendations that I have to offer, you can check out my newsletter, Plague Rages, on Substack. You can also check out my auxiliary Substack, which is more of general interest,
Wow.
and I
2
talk about all
Substack.
this. Yeah, yeah, we're really burning the midnight oil over here. Much of lucubration. This is why I don't sleep at all. Um, yeah, my other Substack, Wolf's Week. You can check that one out also on
Wow.
Substack. I just did a show report of Zeno and Oaklander, if that gives anybody any interest.
Oh, yeah,
So,
nice.
yeah, I think those are the 2 easiest spots. You can check me out on, like, Blue Sky or something like that. I'm like W Rambats, same thing on Instagram, W Rambats. I would normally pitch that I write the black market on Stereogum, but we just filed our last column.
Really?
Yeah, we're done.
Wow.
Yeah,
That's big.
11 years, 140 columns, and yeah, we just got the last one in the bag. So,
Damn, man. End of an era. What happened? Why did you decide to call it a day?
it was this time. I think we're all just kinda burnt out, and the we wanted to leave while we're on top instead of just, like, tumbling down the hill.
Hmm.
Like,
Fair.
we did wanna have, like, a Willie Mays in the Mets era,
Mhm.
like Michael Jordan on the Wizards. So,
Yeah, nobody wants that.
yeah, well, while we like, I think we've published a lot of our best stuff this year, especially, like, Wyatt. Wyatt really published a banger of an intro this year, and, like, again, like, I just never wanna be one of those guys who's just, like, hung on for too long. So, because we're at the very top, it was just like, "Alright, let's just pull the plug now."
Well, yeah, I mean, congratulations on making it 11 years. 11 years to do anything over and over again is a lot.
I mean, that's a
So,
quarter of my life.
it's
Yeah.
a long ass time.
Yeah,
11
yeah.
years. Takes a lot of diligence and discipline to maintain, the consistency required to do that. So, yeah, I mean, power to you. Well done, and I hope it feels like you've earned your rest.
Yeah, I mean, we shall see. I definitely kicked up my feet and listened to Suffocation's Pierce from Within as soon as I was done. I was like, "I don't have to care about new music for, like, a month. This is great."
Yeah. Revel in the old. And lastly, since you were an answer to this question, who is another music head that we should have on the show?
I mean, Doug Moore, hand down. Hands down. If you can get Doug on here, please do. Doug
Where
is the best.
we are already in touch. It will happen, I think.
Oh, yeah, I was like the great Karnak there. I was like, Doug Moore. Who is your next guest?"
Yeah. Nailed it. Um, cool, man. Well, that is all I have. Thank you so much for being here and for sharing your story. Really enjoyed hearing it. Really enjoyed connecting with you.
Yeah, likewise. Thanks so much for having me. Appreciate it.
Yep, absolutely. Be well.
Yeah, likewise.
Thanks everyone for being here. That is a wrap on another episode of For the Record, a conversation series with all manner of music heads about their stories and the music that makes them. It's a production of Grey Matter and the new Crate Coalition experiment in building connected listening graphs. We stamp every music mention that you heard here, from the names of musicians to DJs to journalists to venue owners. And in the background, we're mapping these names to form those yet unseen connective threads between. Want to get involved? Check out our website, greymatter.fm. It's grey with an E. Or you can come hang out in the Crate Coalition Discord. We'll see you next time.